Hello, I'm Paul Carlson, and welcome to the Protected Life Weekly. On today's show, we're going to be talking about families. We're going to talk about defensive firearms, concealed carry, safe storage techniques, and much, much more. You have tuned in to the best place to get self-defense and personal protection information, and it all starts right now. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, Action Target. Action Target is the world leader in range systems, portable steel target systems, and paper targets. Whatever your shooting needs, Action Target has you covered. Visit them at www.actiontarget.com. Well, folks, I tell you what, I am very pleased to have a couple of guests with us here today to talk about concealed carry and families. Joining us from Colorado is a father, an author, professional defensive firearms instructor, the owner of ICE Training Company, developer of the Combat Focused Shooting Program, and executive director of the Personal Defense Network, Rob Pincus. Rob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful Colorado morning. It's crisp, clear. I'm out here on the front porch, having a great time. Appreciate you having me on.
Outstanding, Rob. I know you've got a very busy day, and I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Also with us from a little bit more east from Iowa is a mother, a blogger, a defensive firearms instructor, and a woman that's known for teaching courses specifically about carrying a concealed weapon with a child, with a baby, Melody Lauer. Melody, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well and very happy to be here with you today. And hi, Rob.
Hey, Melody.
Outstanding. Well, what I wanted to do was get together you two because you are two folks that, number one, have children. Young children to older children. You've dealt with some of the issues that surround firearms in families, self-defense, personal protection in families, and you're also both in the firearms industry. So not only do you have some actual experience in doing what it is that you're talking about, but you spend time writing and or teaching about what it is that we're going to speak about today. And so again, I really appreciate you being here. Rob, I want to dive in with you right now. For parents out there that might be wondering or thinking about a firearm for personal protection for their family, why a gun?
Yeah, that's really where we start, right? Is making that decision to want to protect our family for a lot of people. Some of us grew up with guns, we're maybe armed professionals, things like that. Other people come to the decision in life to be interested in personal defense, really from the standpoint of wanting to defend that which they cherish the most, which is their family. And more in our industry and in our community, we see people who come into this industry in their 30s, in their 40s, when they really have something they want to defend, something they value more than themselves, more than life itself, that the kids, and whether it's my 20-year-old daughter or my 3-month-old daughter, she's 3 months today, that feeling and that urge is strong. And I think it's important that we address first, respect that decision to be in a position to defend that which you care about the most, and then we start talking about the gun. And the gun, why the gun? The gun because it's the equalizer, right? It's the piece of machinery, it's the tool that makes you as capable as possible of defending yourself in a worst case scenario. Not every worst case scenario, but in a lot of them that people are worried about today, and that's why the gun.
And so really what you're saying is the gun is the secondary consideration, and also that it's a tool for a very specific niche, and that's important for people to understand, I think.
Absolutely. It's that mental decision to defend yourself. It's not about the gun. It's not about becoming a gun hobbyist. It's not about wanting to be a shooter. It's not about wanting to exercise your Second Amendment rights. It really is, first and foremost, the interest in personal defense and safety that then leads to you to consider all the options. And of course, a firearm is a really important option. It's not an option for everybody, right? If you live in Manhattan, not an option. DC is struggling with how it's an option. Other areas of the country it's easier. Some areas of the country it's harder. There are people internationally. We're on the World Wide Web. It's worldwide. It's not always an option. Where it is an option, it absolutely needs to be considered. And how you do it responsibly is really what I hope we're going to be talking about this morning.
Absolutely. That's really the direction that we're going to drive. And you brought up the idea that safety really has to be the overarching concept, personal safety and personal security. And when we bring a firearm into a family, it changes that dynamic of safety. Melody, let's switch over to you. When you think about firearms and family and kids, What safety considerations do you think are really important to consider when we think about bringing a firearm into the home?
Well, I think the first and foremost one is access from the child's standpoint, and how much, I guess, people underestimate the abilities of their children to find and get access to firearms. We hear a lot of statistics from the anti-gun side of things about how you're more likely to have an accident in with a firearm in your home than you are to use it in self-defense. And we know now that that's true. You are more likely to do that, and that's our own fault for not storing those firearms in a safe manner. I think it's really easy to think of getting that gun and getting it as that defensive tool we want it to be, but also setting a construct that will protect us from that same firearm or our children from that same firearm. So that storage becomes very important. The inhibiting access from your children becomes very important. And then I think the second one, and maybe even just as equally as important, is education for the entire family. I know some people who think it's better to hide firearms from children and hide firearms from other family members, thinking that will be safer than actually educating them on what happens if you do find a firearm. What do we do? What do we not do? And I think those two things are equally important when it comes to introducing a firearm into the home.
I like that, Melody, and you hit on some topics there that are right in Rob's wheelhouse. So, Rob, I want to head straight back to you. Last year in July, you did a segment on Fox and Friends, and that segment dealt with the difference between a properly staged defensive handgun and a defensive handgun that was staged in a quick access safe. Tell us a little bit about the difference, what it is that you found, and why it's so important to think about how it is that you stage that defensive firearm. And maybe we even need to start with what's the difference between storage and staging.
Right. That's the key. Is storage is what we do with our firearms. Melody talked about access control first, and access control is all about storage. Responsible storage of a defensive firearm we tend to characterize as staging, which means it's prepared for use. And when a firearm is prepared for use, that means that you're preventing unauthorized access one way or another, but you're trying to maximize the efficiency of bringing that firearm into play if you need it. Now, when we talk about home defense and we talk about families and kids, that's really where that educational issue comes in. A lot of times that leads to the question of, well, how old, at what age, when should we talk to kids about guns? Well, I look at it as you would talk to kids, in an era where everyone smoked, right? When I grew up, my grandparents smoked. There were smokers all over the place, ashtrays all over the place, matches and lighters all over the place. When did you teach kids about matches and lighters and fire? Well, a 1-year-old isn't going to operate a lighter. But once a kid is intellectually curious and physically capable of utilizing the matches or the lighter inappropriately, you're going to teach them about it. When the kid is old enough to reach the controls on the stove, you're going to teach them about it. When a kid is old enough to be curious about your vehicle in a car, you're going to teach them about it. The firearm's the same way. So when the child is old enough to be intellectually curious, and especially when they're old enough to be physically capable, even if they're not intellectually curious, that's when you have an obligation to teach them about the firearm they may come in contact with. For some people, staging just means carrying a gun inside their home all the time. They put a holster on, they put a gun on, and they wear it inside their home. They've staged their defensive firearm. For others, it means hiding it, putting it out of sight, but not really secured in any way. For a lot of people, and what I usually recommend as a starting point for the family that has defensive firearms, is that quick access safe. Something that is secure but requires some gross motor skills, and very quick, simple, hit the keypad, pop the safe open, reach in, grab the gun. Obviously, a child can figure that out. A child can find that gun that you have hidden in the cabinet, on top of the refrigerator, under the cushion, whatever it is. And you owe them, you owe the firearms community, and of course you owe the responsibility you have yourself as a firearms owner. You owe yourself that educational piece at that point.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Rob. Having the understanding of when it's appropriate to educate is key. You said you have a 3-month-old. I'm guessing you haven't started going over firearm safety rules with your daughter yet. That's probably not appropriate. Melody, how have you handled that with your kids? You have kids of varying ages. If you don't mind, and please don't share anything you're not comfortable sharing, what's the age range of your kids? Rob said he's got a 3-month-old and a 20-year-old. Where are you at in your family, Melody?
I have a 6-year-old, I have a 3-year-old, and I have a 1-year-old.
Okay.
So we have been pretty much about the time that they are able to walk. Now, granted, like you said, or like Rob said, when you have matches and lighters laying around all the time, there's going to be that introduction at that very young age. Our children have seen guns on myself and on my husband since they were born. In fact, a gun has been present at the birth of all three of our children. So they are constantly, via just watching us and watching how we handle from the time of birth, they are getting an education, whether we're actively teaching them or not. That safe modeling is very important at those ages. And at the time where they start to getting communicative, and I'm talking as young as 1 to 2 years old, we are starting to, every time they're watching us intently as we're using those guns, we're talking about, okay, watch how mommy keeps her finger off the trigger. We're talking about nomenclature. You know, this is a muzzle. This is where the bullet comes out. Things along those lines. And by the time they get to about, 2.5, 3 years old, we're talking about the 4 rules of gun safety. We're talking about what do you do if you find a gun. Stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell an adult. The NRA's Eddie Eagle program is pretty good about listing those things. Then, and of course, this is all based upon a child's understanding. There are children who have learning disabilities or things like that, where it may take them longer to get these things, and it's entirely up to your personal assessment of your family and what they're capable of. But in our family, around the age of about 5 was when we introduced actually shooting firearms to our oldest son, who we have a little .22 rifle. We took him out to what he calls the target park, and we just did some .22 long rifle shooting, and now he's able to repeat the 4 rules of gun safety pretty regularly. If he asks to see either his guns or our guns, we allow that. We have a very open policy where if they want to ask about guns and they want to see guns, we're very open to, okay, let's get it unloaded, let's make sure it's safe. What do you want to see? Because that takes the curiosity out of it. So my 7-year-old is really excited to go shooting anytime. He really wants to. Or he's almost 7. He'll be 7 next month. And my 3-year-old is getting to the point where she's really interested in it. So probably within the next year, we'll take her out and we'll
So
show
it
her.
sounds like,
and of course, my 1-year-old, yeah.
not even ready yet, right?
Not ready.
Yeah, but it sounds like you've got the attitude that it might be a different time to start shooting with each child, based on that individual child and their level of responsibility, level of understanding, and level of interest.
Absolutely.
Well, you talk about curiosity, Melody, and Rob, I'll kind of toss this back over your way. This is something that I'm finding with my family. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and my kids are now old enough to know and understand all kinds of things about guns. And one of the challenges that we have is appropriate places to be able to discuss. As Melody said, I want my kids to feel comfortable around firearms, comfortable asking questions. However, when we're in the line at the bank or walking through TSA security, it's probably not the time to ask about guns. You've got a 20-year-old, so you've been through this, although it was a little bit of a different time politically and culturally. How did you handle those kinds of questions in helping your child understand the appropriate times and places to talk about firearms?
Yeah, that may be kind of the trickiest part. When you have a child who, the last thing you want to do is create that negative stigma, right? You don't want to buy into the political correctness, but at the same time, there is that really curious, precocious, I think is the word that's used, most complimentary to describe a child's complete lack of discretion. They are precocious, right? At 3, 4, 5, they will kind of talk about anything, say anything, because they don't know the difference, right? The establishment without creating fear, I think, is really important. Establishing the importance of discretion without creating a negative stigma to it. We're not doing anything wrong. We're not doing anything that's secret. It's just that there's appropriate times and places to talk about things. And you can take that as far as you want. There certainly are. There's a moment that all parents deal with where it's not appropriate for the child to talk about poop. But there's that period of time where the kid's going to talk about poop because that's a new thing, and they're learning where to put the poop, not in their pants, but in the toilet, right? And sometimes that's funny, and sometimes it's completely inappropriate, and sometimes it's embarrassing. And guns are kind of the same way. Is when the kid brings the gun up in the bank line, especially when you're carrying concealed, right? And as Melody said, her kids have seen her with a gun on all the time. So if in the bank line, you're not supposed to have the gun, and that, well, if it's concealed, nobody's going to know, and there's a lot of this that goes on in our community, the bank sign, the theater sign that's posted, don't bring your gun into the theater, but you want to take your kids to the movie, and you don't feel safe, and you know that the sign doesn't carry the weight of law, but the last thing you want is that 4-year-old or 5-year-old saying, Mommy, do you have your gun in your purse, when you're standing in that theater line, and it's going to cause a ruckus. And that's a delicate balance, and I always err on the side of, I think, being proud as a firearms owner and being confident that what I'm doing is right, and letting the kids know that what we're doing is right. Not everyone is comfortable with it, and not even necessarily making that a negative, but just making that real and creating that maturity, that emotional maturity quickly. But at the end of the day, when the kid says, hey, Daddy, you have your gun, is that a bad guy over there, and points at someone that isn't a bad guy, just someone standing in your presence, and
Somebody with a beard.
Yeah, like a beard, exactly. Like that is the time to say, no, sorry, ha, 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 laugh it off. And you do have to be really careful what you say. For us in the firearms community, it's firearms. And in other communities, I'm sure people deal with other things. Being sensitive to that and creating a sensitivity for your kids is important. I've had also in my life a lot of stepkids and people that I've been in relationships with that had older kids who were very curious. We talk about curiosity is here comes the gun guy. So here's the guy that shows up with the gun logos and gun safe and carrying a gun. And when you have a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old that isn't used to guns, that's really important to confront as well. And I think that if every parent doesn't deal with that, if every armed adult doesn't deal with entering into a mixed family where you have a firearms person and a non-firearms person, at least you deal with that when it comes to the friends that come over. And now your kids are going to tell their friends when they're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old in the house, yeah, my dad has a gun, my mom has a gun, this is where we keep the guns, there's the gun safe. So these conversations are all around us, and I think it's really important to confront them, to know that they're going to be there, and to handle them responsibly and proudly, not as if you're doing something wrong.
No doubt about it. That's a really good way to look at things, Rob, and it's one of the things that I consider very much as my kids are growing older is the idea of the friends. The friends aren't going to have all of the background that my children have when it comes to gun safety, when it comes to gun education, when it comes to the respect and the conversations. And so that's definitely something that people need to consider, especially as kids enter into the teenage years and learning how to deal with all of those issues. And it really falls into place with things like race and religion and sexuality and all the things in our culture that sometimes are challenging as parents to talk about and to teach about. It really falls into those areas of not wanting people to be ashamed or concerned, but at the same time be educated and appropriate. Melody, you had a chance to hit national television. We talked about Rob and on Fox and Friends, and you were on The Doctors, and you were there specifically to talk about how to carry a concealed handgun while you're carrying a baby. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that experience, first of all, visiting The Doctors, and you kind of came in a situation where you didn't necessarily know exactly what was going to go on and how things were going to be approached. How did that go for you?
No, I didn't. It was very, I left here, Iowa, not knowing what I was getting into as far as even what I was going to be talking about or how long I was going to have to talk about it. Mm-hmm. I got there and got very conflicting messages. One person wanted me to talk about how firearms accidents happen. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And then another person came in and said, no, we don't want you to talk about that. We want you to talk about how to carry a baby on your person. And I said, okay, I can talk about that. And then that person came out and said, no, we want you to demonstrate this. And I was still being briefed as I was walking onto the stage. So I was very nervous because and then they told me they're going to stick to a script and they're going to ask you certain questions. They asked one question that was on the script, and then they went completely off script. And it was a free-for-all. And actually, they edited out quite a bit of what was really happening in the conversation. But so what it came down to was kind of that argument we commonly hear of, is this something that people should be doing? Period. Should mothers be carrying firearms with their children present? And is that too extreme? And of course, my answer is no, but to a lot of people, that is very extreme. The idea that you would be carrying a firearm while also caring for and even carrying your child in arms. There's a irrational fear of that child's going to somehow get access to your firearm, or of course people who don't understand guns think that even just a bump or a kick or something will make the gun go off, and of course we know that doesn't happen, but that doesn't help people who don't have that understanding of what firearms do and do not do. So that's kind of what it came down to, and kind of that political tug of war of how we feel about protecting our children versus, but guns are bad.
Well, really, the theme of the show seems to probably fall along the lines of how people in general feel. There are some people, like the three of us, that look at it and say, well, of course I'm going to carry my firearm. I'm probably going to be more likely to have my firearm because now I've got even more to protect than I had before when that new child comes into the world. But then there are other folks who are ignorant and don't understand. And I don't mean ignorant in a negative way. They just don't know about firearms, about firearm safety, and they think that it increases the risk dramatically, and they don't know how to mitigate that risk. And so I can understand both aspects. I want to take just a moment. We've got more than 20 folks that are out there watching the show live, which is awesome. This is the second live show that we've done. Folks, on the right-hand side of your screen, there should be a text box there that you can type in questions. If you've got a question, type it in. If it's for me, if it's for Rob, if it's for Melody, I'd love to pass those on, and I'm sorry that I haven't mentioned that sooner. So if something comes up, go ahead and ask it. I want to keep on this idea of carry, and Rob, I'm going to start with you because I think sometimes for men it's a little bit easy for us to conceal firearms. We don't have some of the wardrobe restrictions and limitations that are placed on us by society that women do. Now that you've got a young baby again, what's changed about carrying? What have you had to change about your concealed carry techniques now that you're carrying a baby around in a pack, you got a baby in your arms, you're carrying car seats?
Yeah, really I haven't changed anything about the way I carry. What I have changed and really leading up to the birth of the baby in the last few months, leading up to it is the thought process, the mindset. Worked on a lot more one-handed shooting, one-handed presentation, and thinking more about the context of use of the firearm. As time goes on and the baby becomes older and we reach that kind of in-between age, that age we were talking about earlier where she has the physical capability but maybe not the intellectual or emotional maturity to deal with being around firearms, that will probably change more than has changed in the short term. Melody came through a combat focus shooting class and an advanced pistol handling class that I put on in Iowa in June, and of course that was kind of right on the heels of this media attention that she got this spring and this opportunity that I think she's leapt upon to talk about being armed as a parent and especially as a mother, and she's thought probably more than most people in the very short time frame about how to deal with carrying a baby and carrying a gun. And we kind of exchanged notes. I asked her, she actually shared with the class kind of her techniques and what she was teaching, what she was talking about, and that helped me to really solidify the fact that this really is different. It wasn't just me saying, gee, I'm going to have a baby around again, I better practice this or think about this a little differently. This really is something that needs to be addressed, and that's why, as last week when we talked about doing this, this is incredibly important. The newest class that ICE Training has put out in the world is the Family Firearm Safety Seminar, right? It's like a 2-hour hangout at the range, talk about guns, talk about how to interact with guns and kids. It's a multi-instructor class where we start as a group and then we separate the kids. The kids go off with the instructor and the adults stay with another instructor and talk about some of these hard issues, and then we bring the kids and the families, the adults back on the range, and they work together on the range so that the parents can see what the kids have accomplished, and then the parents obviously get some range time too. So this family firearms concept is incredibly important, and sure, it's more real for me than it has been in a long time, and I applaud that the effort that Melody's putting out to get people thinking about it, if nothing else. It's really important, and certainly her work has kind of reinvigorated my interest in making this not just a personal journey, but really a professional journey as well, and I appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about it with everybody today.
Oh, no problem at all. I mean, for you, just like me and like Melody, this really is a personal journey that really has helped to teach me as a professional about what it is that people need to be thinking about, and how it is that we need to approach safety in general, not just the firearms part. Now, Melody, I'm going to turn that same question over to you. When you brought a new baby into your life, well, you didn't really just bring it in. I'm sure it was a little bit more dramatic than that. But when the new baby is here, it's part of the family now. What changes for you as a mother, as a female, when it comes to firearms and self-defense and carrying that gun?
Well, unlike Rob, I actually went through quite significant changes. At
Okay.
the time when I first had my first child, I was carrying a 4-inch 1911 all-steel 1911. And I was carrying that behind the hip, and I was very good with that gun. But after having a child and having to carry that child and all the baby gear, and of course, I was the typical new mom. I had everything, and I carried everything. And it was just too much. It was too much to carry that heavy of a gun and a reload and a knife and everything and the baby, particularly with nursing and all those other things. And I also found, I started thinking immediately, like, what happens if I'm in a defensive situation and I have my child with me? Well, I started practicing strong handle me, weak handle me shooting, knowing that I'd have one hand to hold my child. And I realized that I was not as quick or as accurate with the 45 as I was with a lesser caliber. So I switched from a 45 caliber to a 9mm caliber, but I still carried behind my hip. And I actually continued to carry behind my hip for several years until pretty much my second child came along, and I realized that I spent a lot of time bent over,
Right.
tying shoes, putting on coats, and the concealment started to become an issue because every time I bent over, even though I was doing it like I was supposed to, bending at my knees and things like that, the concealment became a problem. And I always was afraid if someone sees that and I'm putting on a coat or I'm tying a shoe and they just come and attack me because they see my gun, I am less able to defend it when it's behind my hip. So I switched to appendix carry, and I have not gone back. I think it's much more defensible, and I've been much happier with that, and I've put a lot more emphasis in my training on strong hand, weak hand only. I know a lot of classes say, oh, well, only do such a percentage of training on strong hand, weak hand shooting or strong hand, weak hand manipulation. I have a lot more emphasis on it now than I did before I had children.
And that completely makes sense. And I know that in what it is that Rob teaches and what it is that I teach, we teach based on context. What is your lifestyle dictating for you? And if you've got something in one hand, it makes sense to be able to shoot with the other hand. It's pretty simple. I've got a comment that's come up on the screen, and I appreciate that comment. It says, I find myself monitoring what hand I carry the diaper bag, kiddos, and the coffee mug as it pertains to the gun side. And there's no doubt about it. Those of us that aren't lugging kids around all the time anymore or haven't had that wonderful part of life yet, we do need to think about that when it comes to grocery bags, gym bags, car keys, those kinds of things. But when you're defending your child, that squiggly wiggly thing, it makes a heck of a lot more difference to make sure that you have your gear set up appropriately so you can access your firearm should you need to. There's no sense in carrying a gun that you're never going to be able to access because you cover it up or occupy the hands that are going to be able to access that. Do you guys have any tips about that? How it is that you would suggest diaper bags, how you carry the child specifically?
My thing is, you don't have to carry everything. I learned that very quickly. It took me about a week after having a child to really realize that a diaper stuffed in your back pocket and a few wipes is really all you need to carry with you. The rest you can leave in the car. That greatly limits the dithering, to borrow from William April, the dithering that you're going to be doing, the balancing all those different items. So really limiting what you're carrying is going to help a lot. I find personally, because I am so small and I am not that strong, having multiple children, I kind of just have to start delegating tasks. Like, okay, I have a little backpack that my son will carry, and I will actually have him carry stuff because I can't carry everything and be expected to be the defender if anything goes down. So I'm getting better at delegating tasks, even for my little guys, than I am for just carrying everything and taking that responsibility myself. So that would be my number one tip.
Rob, any thoughts about how you carry things and spread out all that gear that you need to have for a child or feel like you need to have?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, it's funny that Melody mentioned that she felt like she couldn't carry as much as she wanted to and the baby. I was like, wow, diaper bag, cool. Let me put an extra tourniquet in there. Let me put like, because me, I'll go out with the T-shirt and the gun and the magazine that's in the gun and a knife, and maybe there's a tourniquet, maybe not on me, but the medical equipment usually is in the car. The medical equipment usually is in an off-body carry kind of bag somewhere close by. I'm not one to think I got to carry 3 guns where I feel like I'm unsafe, right? I travel a lot of parts of the world where I can't have a gun and have for a long time, so I get a little bit complacent with that, and it's funny how that bled over to the baby supplies, right? The last few days, my wife's maternity leave, the baby's 3 months old, wife's maternity leave ended 4 or 5 days ago, so she's been pulling the 12-hour shifts at the hospital, and it's been Mr. Mom, literally with a diaper and, the wipes I'll figure out, and I got a bottle in my back pocket and a baby in my arm, and, my gun is there and my knife is there and the other stuff is there, but I'm not one to kind of maximize gear, right? The brain, the solutions, the issues that we're going to deal with are way bigger than the gear. The gear is somewhere. When it comes to the baby's going to have priority. I mean, I'm going to carry the bottle before I'm going to carry an extra magazine. I'm going to obviously carry the baby before I'm going to say, well, I'd be safer if I wore the baby on my back and, spun around like John Belushi going up the steps of the dean's office, right, all the time. It's just not real. So for me, the priority is on going to lunch. The priority is on running the errands. The priority is on getting to the bank. And incidental to that, I have to have the baby with me when I'm responsible for the baby. Incidental to that, I want to be able to defend myself and the baby, and there's tools that go along with that, and finding responsible, safe, appropriate ways to carry those tools with the baby has really not been that much of a challenge for me. I've got this great carrier that is not a baby carrier. It's actually, I think, was sent to me as a watermelon carrier. It just happens the baby fits in it from Velocity Systems, because they did not manufacture baby items, but they did put this thing together that happens to hold the baby really well. And it's great, and it carries the baby high on my chest, and she gets to look out, and she sees the world, and she loves it. And, a couple of dry reps proved to me very quickly and easily that I can get to my gun in the appendix carry position, get it out, angle my body, turn away, and hold her up against me without any issues. When Melody was in that class in Iowa in June, it had been a long time since I really thought about these issues in a specific baby context. We've done executive protection training. We put out DVDs and all kinds of information on shooting in defense of others, and talked about controlling people and using kettlebells or using sandbags or using other implements. But she's got this sand baby that is actually weighted realistically, right? So the head weighs a lot more than it might if it was just a bag of sand. It's not just the top of the bag. There's this whole thing that flops around up there. There's hands that flop around. And the first time I did a drill, I just said, let's do it, and picked up this sand baby she had, and I was like juggling the baby and getting hit by the arm, and the head was flopping around, and you want to control the baby's head, but you shoot the target, and it's a disaster. I think there's a video of it out there somewhere. That practical application of the skill set, at the end of the day, if I'm carrying the baby around and someone tries to kill us at the gas station and I have the baby in my hand, I don't know how worried I am about the baby's head, theoretically. But in a practical sense, when that's all you're worried about is controlling the baby's head and not letting it flop around, that's real. And the corollary is we used to teach in the law enforcement all the time. We talk about, if you get attacked, don't worry about your hat coming off, because that used to be a big deal. State trooper's hat can never come off. Used to be a big deal. You hold on to the license. Don't clamp down on the guy's driver's license. Like, let go of that thing. Your ticket book, let go of that thing. There's a grasp reflex. So these aspects of training exist. We're just putting them now in the context of dealing with a child while armed.
Why has it taken so long for the industry to start looking at these things? It blows my mind as a parent. I mean, I had to make these adjustments immediately when my first daughter was born, and it blows my mind that the industry hasn't looked at this prior to today. What's the change?
I think it's demand. I think it's driven by consumer demand, right? If you go back 20 years ago, 90% of the people taking classes would go to, this school, then that school, then that school. Almost everybody taking training 20 years ago in the private sector, they were hobbyists. In the public sector, we're talking about armed professionals. So armed professionals aren't taking their baby to work, police officers, security, military. The people that were coming to classes and going to every gun sight class available or all the derivatives from gun sight, a lot of them were just hobbyists. And I say just, it sounds pejorative, but it's they were there because they loved guns. They were there because they loved shooting. They were there because they wanted to collect the next certificate. Today, we see, as I talked about at the beginning of the show, we see a lot of these 30 and 40-year-olds that are coming to classes that are only going to take one class. They really just want the life skills. They're not gun people. They're not shooters. And I don't want to make them shooters myself. I want to give them those life skills. But if those life skills include protecting children, naturally they're going to start asking those questions. And so many people are driven to our community because of that desire. They have the means, they have the money, they have the free time, they have the intellect, and they have the family, they have the desire and the motivation to be interested in armed defense, and those two things come together. And more often we see people who aren't just worried about shooting skill, they're worried about contextually appropriate defensive skills, and that's going to include your family.
Absolutely. I've got a couple of comments here that I want to jump in and address. And the first one comes from Elka, and she's wondering about how it is that you can help your child understand what to do if they face a situation where they go to someone else's house and either an adult or a child suggests looking at a firearm. How should we approach that situation with our kids?
I think there's a very important like I said, the Eddie Eagle program has a very good kind of continuation of what you should do. Stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell an adult. Now, if an adult is the one who is suggesting, that's why I think the education is really key, particularly for older kids who can understand this is unsafe handling. So if an adult says, "Hey, look, I got this new gun," and they're handling it in an unsafe manner that the older child can recognize, then the next step, I believe, is the child taking initiative and very kind of almost calmly and casually saying, "That's not interesting to me. I don't want to do that." Because a lot of times, if they can just convey a disinterest, then that will take the conversation another direction. And the other thing, and I've gotten this mostly from Kathy Jackson, where, because she's had this happen with her older children, is that if you've conveyed disinterest, like, "Oh, that's not interesting to me," and they still press the issue, redirect them to something more interesting. So if the child, or the other child says, "Oh, hey, let's go look at my dad's gun," and you say, "I'm not that interested," and then that child presses and says, "Yeah, but it's really cool, let's go look at this," that's time for the child to say, "Well, you know what, I got something even better. Let's go do this," or let's go play video games or something like that. Past that, if they're still pressing, it's time for that child to remove themselves from the environment. Whether that's calling mom and dad and saying, "Hey, this friend is pressing me to play with a gun. I don't want to. Can you come pick me up?" Or finding another more responsible adult, because we know there are irresponsible adults out there who do not handle guns the way that they should. And that's why I think educating your child on what responsible handling looks like is so important.
Rob, do you have any suggestions for Elka on that issue of dealing with adults and or kids that want to show guns?
I like the idea of disinterest. I think that, at some point, and depending on the maturity level, the relationship, I would say conceptually this. The gun is not magic, right? So replace the gun with the prescription pills. Right? Every time I send a kid, any of my stepkids that I've sent over to a friend's house, there's prescription pills in the house. And one of the adults or one of the other kids could have said, "Hey, look, my mom has, Oxycontin." Well, hopefully that hasn't happened. But if that happens, like going to a prescription pill bottle and misusing it is bad. Fire. We talked about fire earlier. Porn. I don't know, whatever those things are that your child is aware exists or is uncomfortable being around under certain contexts, they need to be comfortable as independent, like autonomous human beings to say, "This isn't right. I need to remove myself from the situation. Hey, please stop. I'm not comfortable with that." And what I would encourage in any of my kids is not to be disingenuous about it, but to probably be a little more direct about it and just say, "Hey, you know what? that's not my thing, I'm not into that, or not in this context, I'm not into that. I don't want to, matches are cool, fireworks, right? Fireworks are cool, 4th of July, let's do it, let's go get our parents, but just setting off fireworks in the backyard because there's no kids, there are no adults there and it's after school, probably isn't the way to handle that. And I would look at it much more, 50,000 foot view, anything that is inappropriate, I want the kids to be confident and knowledgeable enough to be able to put an end to it. I look at it. What concerns me the most when we talk about this is we talk about adults misusing the guns, right? How many of us have been in the presence of other adults, maybe adults in our community, instructors, students, whatever, who we felt were not handling firearms appropriately and didn't call it out? And I don't care if it's a gun show, if it's SHOT Show, if it's a trade industry event, if it's a gun shop, or you're in a class with an instructor who's doing something that you don't agree with. How do we handle that? Because how we teach our kids to handle it is just an extension of what we do. Melody made the comment earlier about always demonstrating proper gun handling, demonstrating a proper attitude around the gun. Well, holding others accountable for the way they handle firearms is an extension of that I think is incredibly important to teach, as quickly as we can with intellectual and emotional maturity, considerations.
I really appreciate that comment right there, Rob, because I think that summarizes it and it ties into exactly what it is that Melody said. We are demonstrating from a very early age exactly how to deal with those situations. And if we are timid and if we are not direct about it, then our children are going to learn that same timidness and same lack of directness. And I think that that's critical to either address the situation directly or exit the situation. And to give our children permission to leave a situation, they go over to a friend's house and there's something dangerous going on, whatever it might be, they have permission to exit that situation, and we give them the tools to be able to get a hold of mom and dad however they need to be able to get the help that they need, to find that other adult, whether it's walking right next door and knocking on somebody else's door to say, I need your help. Whatever it might be, that's a better situation than our child not knowing what to do with that dangerous situation. And I think, Elka, that probably handles your follow-up question that you had. So thank you very much for those questions, Elka. Staying on the idea of carry, Melody, real quick, and then I'm going to shift gears after we hit this comment. Christy wants to talk about the idea that sometimes wearing the baby isn't the best option when it comes to concealed carry. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit on my Facebook page yesterday, that as a tactic, baby wearing is a terrible idea. I've talked about this several times because you have your baby physically attached to you. So if you are attacked in any way, that any damage that you're taking, your child is taking too. So one of the things, and now I love baby wearing. I baby wear it whenever I can at home. I don't do it. I used to do it far more out and about until I really embraced this concept that if I'm attacked, I'm basically locking my child into that potential danger. So what I have been advocating is being smart about the times and the places that you choose to baby wear. And I know baby wearing is very, very popular right now, and there's great benefits socially and emotionally. But there are times when maybe it is not the best idea from that standpoint. You can't distance yourself from that child. You can't even just put the child down and draw the violence away from that child, because typically the violence is not directed at the children. I have seen plenty of videos where people are being attacked and the child is left, and the bad guy will walk right past the child to continue his attack on the adult. Usually it's the adult that's the brunt of the attack. And if that child were being carried, you have no option to distance that violence from them. So I think it's behooves people to really think about those instances where if I got attacked right now, would it be better for my child maybe to be in a stroller or a cart? I like to actually corral all three of my kids in a cart by themselves. I can push that cart away from me and draw all the violence away from them. And all three of my kids are contained in a location separate to me. And I think that may, in certain circumstances, be better. Obviously, if it's an active shooter event or something where everyone in the environment is going to probably be killed, it's better for me to try and take all of them with me. But in certain environments where I'm the one who's being attacked or the violence is directed at me, I want to be able to distance myself, and I can't do that if I'm baby wearing.
Yeah, it definitely, again, comes back to the context of the situation. You know,
Yeah.
this is obviously a very serious topic, but I've got in my head as you're talking, and kids in a cart, I'm thinking, Iowa, good solution. Rob in Colorado, oh, that could be a disaster. That cart gets pushed and just, boy, oh boy, that a lot of mountains out there,
Yeah.
right, Rob? That could be an issue. So let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about, we addressed the idea of your kids going someplace else. But what about when your kids' friends come over to the house? You know, Rob, you've got a truck that you wrap up each year with a bunch of sponsors. Obviously, you're a gun guy. You're in the media. I'm sure that you've dealt with this in the past. How do you deal as a family with friends that come over that are interested in guns, that may not have the opportunity to check them out at home, do those kinds of things? Where do you go with that?
A couple of things. You know, earlier you said something about my, older daughter Christina, who's actually, she's tuning in, she's listening. She sent me a text. She said, "Please don't carry the baby like John Belushi." She sent me a text. So she's listening. She's tuning in.
Hey, Christina, good to see you.
She actually had, a deal with, it was a different area. It was Tennessee, but she had to deal with going to school with a bag that had a shotgun and a clay pigeon on it, and being sent home, or being told, you can't bring that bag to school anymore, that kind of stuff. So we've dealt with this for, a long time. And, I mean, me, we're friends. Melody, we've known each other, been on the range, we talked a lot. I'm direct, right? So I don't hesitate. If the parent comes to meet me, shake my hand, and say, "Hey, little Johnny's coming over to hang out," or Susie, or whatever, and I just wanted to say hi, and here's my phone number, I'm probably going to bring it up. I'm probably going to say, whether it's the first time, second time, third time, at some point I'm probably going to say, "Hey, and just so you know, some people think it's a big deal. It's not for us. We have firearms in the house. I don't want that to ever be an issue, and then the kids can't hang out together or whatever." But if the kid comes over, and unfortunately 9 times out of 10 the kids just show up, right? Mm-hmm. And the parents haven't made an introduction. I'd have no idea who the parents are. There's a kid at the house, and I try to meet the parents. I don't drop the kids off somewhere. I walk the kids up and say hi. I don't ask, "Hey, do you have guns here?" I know that my kid can handle those guns. But if I would never expect that if the family had something, I don't know what, a dog. If the family had a dog that wasn't good around kids, when my child goes over to their house, it would be irresponsible for that parent not to say, "Hey, listen, be careful around the dog. Just, don't move. So we keep her in this back room. Don't put your face near the dog. Kind of stand up straight. Put your hand out. Let the dog sniff you. She'll get used to you. He'll get used to you. You'll be fine." Well, if there's a family that has a gun on top of the refrigerator, then that's kind of like that dog. Probably not going to do anything, but it could be a problem if it's not handled properly. I know my kid can handle it. If a kid comes over to my house and it's a day where there's a lot of guns moving around, we're getting ready to go to the range, I just got back from the range, I'm clearing stuff out from the car, I'm not going to hide it from my child's friend. I'm going to be really overt. I'm going to say, "Hey, yeah, we have firearms, we shoot sometime, ask your parents, we'll take you to the range, maybe your parents have guns." I'll engage the conversation, not with a 6-year-old, but with a 16-year-old, every time. With a 9-year-old, maybe. With an 11-year-old, probably. Again, emotional and intellectual maturity, right? There's 45-year-olds that I don't think are intellectually and emotionally mature enough to have guns. But there's probably some 7-year-olds out there that I would talk to about it, especially if we're getting into the Nerf gun thing and the airsoft thing and the paintball thing. If guns as toys are being talked about, Call of Duty, whatever it is, we're going to have a conversation about real guns too. And if those parents don't like it, they probably should have brought that up if they were that concerned about it, because it is everyday conversation for us.
Absolutely. Well, we were reading Christy's mind. She had a question about when other kids come over, and so great point there, Rob, and that's definitely appreciated. We're starting to get close to where we need to wrap up, Rob. I know you've got a busy day coming, and I want to shift the gear a little bit. We started out with you mentioning and me summarizing that guns are a niche tool for a really small set of circumstances. I want to kind of round out the show by talking about some of the other ways that families need to be focusing on safety. What are specific actions that families can be taking to increase their safety, and maybe those actions have nothing to do with defensive firearms?
One thing I do, and Caleb Causey, I think we're all friends with him, Lone Star Medics. I came to him a few months ago and I said, "Hey, what about this RATS tourniquet that's out there, this kind of elastic band, easy to carry, it got a lot of media, social media hype, attention, advertising, marketing, whatever you want to call it." And I asked him about it, and he said, "It's not proven. I'm not until they prove that it does things as well as some of the cat T's or the soft T wide, all that stuff that we all sort of the go-to stuff that's been combat proven, he wasn't interested in really giving it that much attention. But one of the things that was interesting to me is that it is a tourniquet that can be used on an infant. They advertise it as something. It can be used on a child. It can be used on a canine. If you have a dog, you're a canine officer, things like that. In some ways and in some places that an adult size standard tourniquet can't be used. So we've got one of those RATS tourniquets in the diaper bag. I've got one in the vehicle now. Along with the adult tourniquets, I'd go to the adult tourniquet first, the standard tourniquets. I haven't replaced them, but I've added them to what I'm carrying around because I've got a 3-month-old, and pulling out a cat T, if we go in a rollover accident and some shard of glass, lacerates her leg, so it's just nothing but a stump, I want to be able to stop that bleeding. So changing the medical equipment, thinking more about the medical equipment in that way has been one thing that's changed for me in terms of safety and family defense.
Very good. Melody, what are your thoughts on general changes that may not deal with firearms for safety?
I really like that Rob brought up the medical thing. I think more parents would be better off doing things like infant CPR and just a basic first aid, because we still are more likely to see accidents from and childhood accidents from those. Even having the poison control phone number handy and using it if your child actually ingests something, things along those lines. Taking that same safety mindset, we really do think about things like guns as being so dangerous, but applying that same caution to the poisons that we have in our house and the swimming pools that we have in our backyard, or the chances of our kids falling and things along those lines. And broadening that to just because you have a firearm doesn't make the other things in your house less dangerous. In fact, those are the ones that are more likely to happen to your children in the long run than a firearm. That's a very small percentage of the childhood, accidental deaths in the world.
No doubt about that. And if I might chime in myself, I think as a parent, one of the things I realized was avoidance became so much more important. Number one, not only did I have more to live for once I had a wife and wonderful children, but also dealing with some kind of a violent encounter became so much more complicated. And as a result, it made avoidance that much more important and that much more in the forefront of my mind. And so getting good quality training in avoidance skills, definitely something that should be thought of. We need to start wrapping things up, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge both of you for taking the time to come and speak with us. Melody, I appreciate how it is that you over the past year have really come to the forefront and driven out there and taken quality information to people, whether they like that information or not. The fact that you were ready and willing to go on a TV show where you didn't know what the reception was going to be so that you could share quality information, I appreciate that, and I hope that you're able to continue that. And Rob, I want to acknowledge you for, number one, embracing parenthood and your job as a professional firearms instructor, and really taking things from a conceptual level and taking a look at things and then developing your program around those ideas to share that information with other people in a sensible and an organized fashion, as you always do. I want to take the time to acknowledge you for that. So thank you to both of you for the effort that you are putting into the industry. There's no doubt that there's a positive impact that's being made, so thank you for that. As we wrap up, I want to ask each of our guests one last question, and the question is a fairly straightforward question that's not necessarily all that easy to answer. What is one thing that you are going to do today to help make sure that you lead that protected life? Rob, let's start with you.
I'm closing on the new Western HQ at noon. By 5 o'clock, we're putting security steel screen doors in on the house because the builder didn't want to do it. They didn't want the liability doing it. So we're adding some security upgrades to the house about 4 minutes after we start moving in.
Perfect. I love that, Rob. Again, there's avoidance right there, making a home invasion situation less likely. Very good. Melody, what are you going to do today?
Oh, that's a really actually very good question.
Thank you.
Today, I think I'm just going to continue as usual, making sure that I'm not getting complacent in what I'm doing. I'm not getting complacent in I'm safe, I'm in a safe neighborhood. Today I can let my guard down. Keeping that level of vigilance, that level of being armed, being watchful, and protecting my family the best I know how, and continuing. I've got a class this weekend that I'm going to, continuing my education so I can stay and be the best I can be.
That is outstanding. Thank you both so much for your time. Before we wrap up and head out, please let folks know where they can find you. Melody, where is it that folks can get in contact with you to find out more about what it is that you're doing?
My website, melodylauer.com, is probably the best way. They can find all my social media and stuff through there, which I'm very active on social media.
Outstanding. And Rob, how about you? Where can folks find you?
You can find me and you and Melody in her cameo appearance in the update of network.com. So, that's the best place to go. And we have a lot of family safety information there from a lot of different contributors, a lot of different free videos, articles, all kinds of things. People can find me on social media as well, but personaldefensenetwork.com is the best resource for that getting started, training information, especially as related to armed defense and including some family information.
Outstanding. Well, I definitely want to say thank you to Action Targets, our sponsor for today. Action Targets is a world leader in range systems, steel target systems, and paper targets. Whatever it is that your shooting needs are, Action has you covered. They can build complete range systems with top-of-the-line air filtration system and bullet traps. Their steel targets are safer, easier, and more fun to shoot than the rest. And their paper targets are innovative. In fact, Rob has paper targets. The CFS target is available right through letargets.com. You can find Action Targets at www.actiontarget.com. Folks, thank you so much for tuning into The Protected Life. Again, thank you to our guests, Rob Pincus and Melody Lauer. Make sure you check out what it is that they've got going on. They're obviously intelligent folks that have taken the time to think through how it is that they keep their family safe, and I certainly appreciate that. I would love for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you get information about the Protected Life shows every time that they upload to YouTube. You can just click on that button, subscribe, and you'll be all set to get that information. Folks, get on out there, get yourself some training. When you do, make sure you keep it simple. Please stay safe, and as always, have a great day.